So today we're here with Lisa Jackson, the Vice President of Environmental Policy, Social Initiatives at Apple. She's also the former administrator for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And she leads the way for Apple's global work on sustainability, environmental progress, and social responsibility. Please welcome to the podcast, Lisa Jackson.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming. Welcome to Australia, by the way.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Nothing bad about it.
First time here?
Now this is my third trip.
Oh, wow. And have you travelled around much or just in Sydney?
I've been to Melbourne and I've been to Canberra and now Sydney again.
In the beautiful Sydney. Now, you've had an incredible career and you've actually worked quite closely with President Barack Obama, and you guys did something incredible. You brought in the first national rules to cut car emissions. Can you tell me about how you achieved that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it actually builds on work done in the state that I live and work in now, California. California had a long history of cutting down on car emissions because smog and pollution were really bad in some of the major cities, like Los Angeles. It's kind of a famous thing, the smog in Los Angeles. And so what we really did was follow the lead of California and other states who said, we want to use those same rules to look at, first, making cars a lot more efficient, and then when you make them efficient, looking at greenhouse gas emissions along with the standard emissions. And what makes things like that possible is technology. Along the way, there were great companies coming along who learned about catalytic converters that cut car emissions and smog. And then over time, of course, electric vehicles that came into play that give you options to have vehicles that have really low or even zero emissions.
I got an EV at the moment. I love it. It's also a bit quicker too. You put your foot down.
Oh man, they go.
Goes fast.
I have EVs too. They're amazing. Yeah.
I felt when I first started driving one, I sped a little bit too easily because it doesn't make a noise. You barely know.
You don't even know, and you have to be careful when you're in the city because people they listen for cars. And,
yes.
We don't make any noise.
But they produce less carbon. When you were on that mission, it's so fascinating. Did you come up with the mission to reduce car emissions first, and then the technology followed? Or did you see the technology and then come up with the plan?
That's a really good point. You can't mandate something that doesn't exist into existence. I'm actually an engineer by training, and one of the things I like about smart environmental policy is it follows smart innovation. So, and it's something we use at Apple all the time, but, in the case of cars, somebody invented the catalytic converter and figured out how that could be used to cut emissions. I'm trying not to get really technical.
That's right.
But,
I'm sure someone will understand.
Yeah. But, and the same way with, batteries, storage, clean energy, solar, wind, all these things then turn around and, allow companies to sort of create this ecosystem of ways to do better by the planet.
And working with President Barack Obama so closely day to day, what's something you learnt about him that was really unique that no one would know?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say what no one would know. I think the thing everyone knows and you can tell is that he's just relentlessly focused on excellence, on knowing and understanding the data and having it in front of him before he makes a decision. There's a very, you had to be prepared every time you had a meeting with him. Maybe something people don't know, or it was my little trick. I guess I can say now because he's not my boss anymore. But, first there's two things I always did every time I was going into a meeting. I always checked the sports scores for every team in Chicago because he is a very avid sports fan, loves sports. But also, if things might be a little tough or it's a tough conversation, I would start about asking about his girls. He is just such an incredible family man and father. And, I have two kids of my own, two sons, and, it would just break the ice. You would see this leader of the world turn into just for a second a proud papa, and really human moments.
It's really beautiful because sometimes people can forget that these people who have important roles are just people at the end of the day. And
leaders. And that, something we once talked about, like your family pays the price too, right? They're part of your leadership journey, and so you want to always have them in your heart and your mind.
What's one leadership strategy you learnt from working top levels of government, top levels of Apple that you still carry forward today?
Yeah, I think, Apple's kind of easy for me. You can't be successful at Apple if you're not just relentlessly focused on collaboration across the company. people are really busy working on what they work on. Actually, now I feel bad because one of the things I tell people when they join Apple, and a lot of times they'll come in for their first meeting with me and they'll say, how am I successful here? And I said, look, you're an Olympic swimmer. Sorry, I don't use diver, but I might use diver from now on. And I say, you just joined a team of Olympic swimmers. Everyone here is smart. Everyone here knows what they're doing. They're top of their game. The question isn't whether you can swim, whether you're an Olympic swimmer. It's what do you bring to the team? How do you make the team stronger because of your skill set and your talent? And that only comes by challenging each other. It's a debate culture. It's a place where new ideas get formed in this interaction. Even famously, our headquarters is built around a circle because the idea is the more you interact with each other, these random interactions can produce really great ideas. And I think that, the government is much the same way. The government is a different thing. You serve the public. It's very noble work, and keeping a relentless focus on who you work for is really important. And Apple does that too. You'll hear constantly what the focus is on the user, the people who buy our products, and making sure that we're giving them tools that make their lives better.
It's beautiful to have that space where you can throw out ideas and be collaborative and push back on certain things. I think it was Steve Jobs that mentioned that Apple was like throwing a bunch of rocks into a tumbler, and they might look dirty, it might be noisy, it might cause a bit of a ruckus, but you have polished rocks come out at the end. I feel like that's important for high performance and really getting the best of the best. And you see that day to day? Yeah,
you see it all the time. You also see, I think another thing that is really common, there can be great ideas, but not every great idea ends up in our products because that kind of constant motion and constant thinking and challenging ourselves, what else means some things get left behind, or maybe you put them aside for a while and come back to them later. And it's a very inspiring place for sure.
Has there been a good idea that you've seen that didn't come to fruition that you can share?
I can't share. No, no, not and keep my job. No.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. But there are ones that I remember at one point. One of the engineering managers told me about, Touch ID and how they came up with it. And they had to wait to figure out how it would, they had this technology, but they hadn't figured out how it would end up. And of course, when it ended up in our products, it ended up in a big way.
Wow.
So sometimes the innovation comes before the application. Maybe that's the way I would say it.
It's fascinating because when you're trying to push forward in the space that's never been stepped on before, so does the idea come first, or does the technology come first, or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish our head of engineering was here. I think he would say, even in the context of some of the work we do together, say around recycling and materials, he would say you have to have a goal. You have to know what your North Star is, right? We've challenged ourselves to use more and more recycled materials. And then he says something I really like because I'm an engineer. He says, engineers love constraints. If you just tell somebody to go out and invent something new, it could be anything, right? And it can look like anything. But if you say, okay, I need it to do this and this and this, and you keep making the path narrower, then the innovation kind of gets channeled into something really, really amazing.
It'll be so exciting to watch. And a big shift I've noticed in the last 10 years is the massive reduction of plastics in the packaging and the products. I think we're down to below 3% of plastic in the packaging. What was that process like, reducing it all?
Well, it started with a goal. We wanted to get all plastic out of packaging. Some of that was driven, frankly, by regulatory bodies who were saying, "Can we cut this down?" But of course, Apple always goes further than is the requirement. We want to be a leader, and we're down to. Our packaging is something that people know and expect from us. There's an experience and there's an ease of opening it, and there's just this joy. So you don't want to sacrifice any of that, but you still want to give people, comfort that we're doing our job. We're actually down to under 3%, and I have to remind people that.
Yeah, where is that 3%? I got a new phone recently. I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find it. Yeah. Good. That makes me really happy. It used to be in things like films that would protect the finishes. But those are now all biodegradable. They're basically paper-based. We actually call them origami because they fold so cool around your products. It's actually in things like inks and plasticizers on the package. Yeah, when you see
No wonder
your
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, you won't. It's not noticeable, but it's very classic Apple that people were sort of like, oh, wait, did we mean the inks? I don't know, but we're working hard on it.
I can imagine the detail that you've got to look into when reducing plastics, that you're down to the point of the amount of plastic in the ink.
That's right. Plasticizer in the ink so it'll stick to the box so you can read it.
That is crazy. And your plan is to have zero plastics within the products.
That's right.
What's the plan for that? How do you get rid of the plastic ink?
We're working on innovations and substitutes that don't contain it. So we'll keep doing that.
And Apple's talked about using renewable energy and recyclable materials to continue to make products and avoiding mining for them. How do you ramp that up and really expand that across the whole supply chain? Because it's a big task.
Yeah, it's something that we thought a lot about. I mean, one of the things that we talk about with our products is you don't think about it, but if you remember the periodic table and all the chemicals in it,
yep.
There's over 100, I think, in our products at some place. So that's a lot of material that has to be, of course, mined, but also then processed and brought up to certain standards. We have really high performance standards. If it doesn't behave a certain way, it can impact the way the product behaves or the responsiveness. So we have all these standards. You spend so much time and energy speccing that and getting it and then working with our suppliers to get what you need. It would be a shame to waste it. So although we make products that last a very long time, reliability is one of the things we're known for, we still want to encourage this idea that at the end, that incredible technology that once upon a time was brand new, maybe it's not so brand new 10 years later or whatever, but we can recycle it and get those materials back out. It has a huge impact on our carbon footprint because recycled materials generally just have a much lower carbon footprint than new materials from the earth. It's great for like water quality and other things. It's not to say you won't have to mine. It's just to say let's use the material we have before we go and look for something else. Tim, our CEO, has sort of challenged us to just keep upping the amount of recycled material and product. And if you look across our whole product line, we're about 24% recycled material now.
That's amazing.
iPhone 17, I think, is around 30%. And our best student is MacBook Air, which is at 55%.
Wow, that's like over half the product is recyclable
recycled.
contents.
That's right.
That's amazing. Well, with Tim Cook pushing for more recycled elements, and you've got a recycle robot that pulls them apart.
That's right.
Can you tell me about this robot and how it helps save so much in, pollution from mining?
Yeah, so, Daisy exists. We actually have two. She's twins at this point in the world. And her job is to take apart iPhones. And she does over 30 models of iPhones. So because over the years, we have to think about the older ones more than the newer ones, of course, for recycling. And what we learned in this process, it's super fun. And it started, I've been at Apple 12 and a half years, and it started maybe 11 or so years ago, is that the more we can segregate the different components of Apple, the more likely we are to be able to get something that can be recycled back. So there'll be small amounts of gold, there's tin, there's cobalt in our batteries, there's lithium, there's tantalum and tungsten and materials, some of which are, you can understand why people want to recycle gold. It's worth a lot. But some of the other ones you really have to think about, copper. And so working with specialty materials places around the world to get components recycled to get those materials back. And that's the work of it. It starts with our customers returning a device, whatever it is, not just iPhone, to us. Then it goes through, if it can't be reused, it's going to be recycled, disassembled, and then trying to get those materials back so it can be used to make the next generations.
I can't even imagine the detail that would have to go into even the planning of the robot's software to pull out this little cobalt and grab that bit of gold. Because I suppose if you just shred the phone, it's not something you can just smelt down and put back in the supply chain. You've got to pull all those tiny pieces out.
Yeah, it's a really good point because that is how most people recycled electronics when we started. And I think now there's a lot more focus inside Apple. The one thing we always say is for our users to know and feel comfortable. When you send it back, that's where it's going. If it's an iPhone, it's going to Daisy. And there's a couple other robots too, Liam and Taz, that do very specialized work to get those materials out. I know, it's fun. We got to name them.
No,
and
of
by the
course.
way, they're like smashers in a way. Like,
Yeah.
even though it sounds like
Glorified
fine
smashers.
work, like it's so fun to watch them like banging to get the battery out. And
Yeah.
it's super fun.
I'd love to come see one work because I think super slow, meticulous, but I suppose you'd have to crack some things open and
It uses,
get in there.
and sometimes we use cold because, and there's adhesives in there. Yeah, we'd love to have you. Come visit.
I'd love to come and see because it's an important thing because the more we recycle, the less we have to mine, and it's amazing that you can recycle the materials and not reduce the quality of the products.
That's right.
Is that hard?
Yeah, I mean, recycled material, you have to look at whether any of the properties, I'm not a material person, but whether the properties are degrading. That's pretty common. So one of the things we do is tons of quality testing all along the way. We have reliability labs and quality labs. And one of the things they're doing is making sure that the recycled material doesn't behave any differently than what we spec for the material, no matter where it comes from. We don't want to lower our standards to get recycled material. And I think that's something that people who practice sustainability really have to, like, I love that you love your EV, right?
Yeah.
You should love it more because it's recycled. You shouldn't love it less. And that's one of the goals we set for ourselves at Apple.
Yeah, it's amazing you talk about how you should be able to have an environmentally friendly product without reducing the high performance. And I love my EV not just because it's sustainable, but also because it's a great product.
Right.
And it's amazing that you can
go
achieve.
fast, maybe too fast. Right?
Yeah. The batteries are good.
Yeah, be careful.
Good pickup. But it's good you can achieve both those things. And at Apple, you've done a massive thing where you've actually reduced your emissions by about 60%, while revenue has gone up by 65%. How have you been able to manage that?
Yeah, that's a relentless focus, not just on doing the work of sustainability, but doing it in a business way. We're a very lucky time right now. Clean energy and all the things associated with clean energy are actually cost competitive and sometimes cheaper than starting with the traditional, say, fossil fuel-based approach because the sun is free.
It's there every day.
It's there every day.
Very reliant.
Wind blows, yeah. And so we have that advantage going for us, and there are ways and developers out there that we can invest with who are putting more clean energy on grids, say. Or we have, a mandate now to be a lot more thoughtful about rare earth materials. These are things that we absolutely must have to power and to compete on everything from, new technology to new energy technology. So being smart about recycling and using recycled materials actually helps that as well because everybody's trying to get more and more of this material. So we have these like tailwinds instead of like fighting against us, pushing us, and that helped us make investments in energy or materials that actually are positive from the standpoint of the bottom line. And it's the only way, Sam, that it happens and stays. If it just happens because you're doing it to be charitable or good, it doesn't stay. Business can't, you can't make an economy around that. But if you do it in a way where the economy thrives too, it's going to stay.
In fact, that's where I see the intelligence behind it. The sustainability is done in a way that not just protects the environment, it actually helps the business, which I think is massive because it's so hard. I can imagine it would be hard to balance the two. And there's definitely a stigma out there that you either have to pick one of the two. You've got to either choose sustainability, which is more expensive, or choose a successful business. But it's really reassuring to hear that you can do both and you guys have done both.
Yeah, thanks. Look, we also know that we have a huge advantage, which is scale. We have customers around the world. We have suppliers around the world. When we make a change, we need to make sure it can be done in a way that helps them thrive, but we also can help make markets. So we have a responsibility that's greater than somebody just starting their business, an entrepreneur. So everybody has to do their part where they sit. But yeah, it's really important to us and really important to our finance team that we always have an eye towards making sure this is something that's sustainable for the planet, but also makes sense from a business perspective.
And that being said, 100% of your corporate operations is run on 100% renewable energy.
That's right.
Which is impressive.
Yeah.
What's the challenge or the biggest hurdle in scaling that out to all the products and the product life cycle?
Yeah. It's, so if you look at our carbon footprint, there's Apple, all of our facilities, those all already are carbon, they run on clean energy. So no emissions there. We have some travel. I had to get here today. So you have to think about things like carbon offsets. You've probably heard about that because right now.
Like this one?
Yeah.
We're
Trees
carbon
are
offsetting right
wonderful.
now.
I always say,
feel some fresh
people are
air.
looking for technology. The best technology to take carbon out of our air are trees, right? They breathe in carbon dioxide and they breathe out oxygen every year when they grow. And so that is, we can talk about trees in a second, but yeah, like when I think about our entire carbon footprint, because we've done such a good job on ourselves, what's left is our users. So 29% of our carbon footprint is you plugging in your Mac to use it, powering it up, or charging your iPhone or your other devices. And we consider that part of our carbon footprint.
I find that amazing that you consider, once the product's sold, done, as a user, I'm out there charging my phone and Apple still considers that their responsibility to deal with the carbon.
We took that on as part of our commitment for being carbon neutral by 2030 because it allows us to do a really amazing thing. First, it forces us to relentlessly make really energy efficient devices. That helps because the cleanest energy is the energy you don't use, right?
Yep.
But then second, it allows us to do some pretty cool projects around the world. So maybe I can talk a little bit about one we're doing here in Australia, in Victoria. It's a 80 megawatt solar farm. It is the only reason we're investing in this farm, and it's being built by a solar developer. But the reason we are investing in it is to meet our users' needs for clean energy. So, of course, our users are all over Australia, but our idea is if we can put more clean energy on grids where our users are, that balances out your need to charge your device.
Wow.
And so that 80 megawatt solar farm is the first of projects which will eventually, by 2030, mean that there's 1 million megawatt hours of electricity on grids around Australia to cover your needs.
That's incredible. So Apple is building a solar farm in Australia to offset the electricity that I use to charge my iPhone.
Yeah, to put clean energy on so you can feel good that, hey, because I have an Apple product, there's new clean energy on the grid. And it's new, it's addition. It's not taking clean energy that someone else has already, done the work to get.
Yeah.
It's because we have users here.
That's amazing.
So many.
Again, I find it so impressive that Apple takes responsibility not from when they've sold the product, but also for the user's life cycle when you're building this solar plant to offset that. And you said that's one of many projects?
We'll need more projects. We have to get up to 1 million megawatt hours a year by 2030. So more to come.
And is that how much you calculate as Australia we use on Apple products? How do you calculate how much clean energy Apple needs to produce in Australia?
Yeah, we're careful. We obviously, when you plug in all that data, that's your data. We have no visibility into it, but we can estimate how much how much electricity you need to charge at night, and we know how many devices are sold and activated. So we make a pretty broad estimate without getting too much in your business. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, gotcha. a rough estimate on the products.
That's right.
So you've got the solar farms, and are we doing something in the forestry section as well?
Yeah,
in
you
Australia?
mentioned trees. So the other side of
Love a good tree.
We were talking about our users. That's a big part of our carbon footprint. And then there's our supply chain. We talked about how we have to get them onto clean energy, and there's lots of work happening all around the world on that. But there's going to be emissions that are left over by 2030. We're just not there yet in terms of getting to zero carbon. And so, again, it's that offset idea. Okay, well, if carbon's being emitted, how do we remove an equal amount from the air? So that's what makes us neutral, this idea that we're carbon neutral by 2030. And we looked around at a lot of technologies, and we found one we really like, and it's green, and it has a trunk, right? It's not always trees. Mangroves, grasslands, trees, when they grow, every time you see the trunk get bigger, that's all carbon that it's taken out of the air through its leaves and turned into plant material. So that process, we think, allows us to invest in. So in Queensland, we have a 1,700, I think, hectare farm. It was once a sugarcane farm, and that left the land in pretty tough shape. So the idea is when you can move from land that's been degraded by farming into a more sustainable agricultural situation, that creates a carbon removal opportunity that's new and that we can help to fund. So there, we have something called the Restore Fund, where we invest in carbon removal, natural carbon removal projects. And there, it's a macadamia nut farm.
Oh, beautiful.
I know.
Love good macadamia.
Yeah, it's good for the land. It's good from a water perspective. It's sustainable. It's good from a biodiversity perspective on that land. And it also has the advantage of being something that's economically sustainable. You can grow those nuts and you can sell them.
So does Apple sell nuts now?
Yeah. No, everybody's like, they're not apple trees, they are nuts, but we're not selling them. But a developer, a farmer somewhere is. We're more interested in two things. We really believe, again, we're a business, so we shouldn't ask people to do things that are just, they cost you money, but you get nothing back. In this case, you get two things back. You get money back, so it's an investment. You put in $1 and you get more than $1 back. That's great because of the farmer's proceeds. But you also get carbon. We can quantify how much carbon is being pulled from the air. It's a project that project does really well on the money side in terms of return. And
how does it make a return from selling the nuts?
Yeah, it's the farmer who's selling the nuts, right?
It's like Apple's side quest.
Yeah, but we don't. No, we don't have a side hustle. We don't own the farm, but we do. We're invested in it.
Gotcha.
Like you would invest in a farm or somewhere. So the fund will eventually say, "Oh, here's your money back from the sale of your share." But we care a lot about the carbon that's being pulled out. And what we have to do with projects like that is pair it with other projects that project pays a good return and removes some carbon. There's other projects that remove a lot of carbon, but maybe their return is less. But if you meld that together into a portfolio, into a fund, overall you have carbon being removed and returns happening at the same time. So it's good for business. And
That's
it's good
amazing.
for the farmer.
Yeah, it's a win-win for everyone. And a diverse portfolio of renewable energy and restoring old farming land is a big thing. I went to Perth a few months ago with the Commonwealth Games Association because they've got a new program where they're planting a tree for every athlete that competed at the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, cool.
I got to go and plant the first tree, which was nice.
Oh, congrats. That must have been cool.
It was just nice. There's just something empowering about planting a tree.
Yeah.
Like, there's just something that feels...
About the future. You plant a tree for future generations.
It feels
not
right.
For yourself. Yeah, it's cool.
And overseeing old farmland that had been kind of destroyed from over-farming or not properly upkept, you're getting the win from not just rejuvenating the land, but then the carbon offset of the trees and the nuts in your case as well. So it seems like a massive win-win. So those are the first two in Australia. Are there any others we can hear about at the moment?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Top secret for now.
Yeah, happy to talk later when we can.
Off the record. What about around the world? Is that something that we're working on globally as well?
Yep. Lots and lots of projects around the world, and lots of investments. And what's really cool is that our suppliers have started to join us in investing in these projects. So not only are suppliers investing in clean energy for their operations, which is now mandatory for our suppliers at Apple, but a lot of them are saying, okay, well, I still have some emissions I'd like to offset. And so they'll invest too, because it's an investment that makes sense for them. So again, it's, private sector has a huge role to play in helping us move to a better and more sustainable future, but it has to be done with an eye on what makes sense from business, because they also have another role to play, which is, making and creating economic value and hiring people and jobs. And so the other thing I love about those projects is it's about economy and jobs and not having to choose, one or the other.
Yeah, I love that it doesn't just help the environment, but it makes sense financially, because I suppose if it's if it doesn't make sense financially, you can't do it long term, and then the impact would be much less. So the fact it works on both fronts, I think, extends the impact for really many, many years to come. And I think it's amazing that Apple includes the suppliers of the products that they then put together in that. And Apple's mandated for those suppliers to be sustainable as well. Yeah. Were they happy to come on board? How did you go to your suppliers and say, well, you got to match the same standards as us?
You know, I always say suppliers are people too. I mean, you know, just as we have goals and we want to do right by the planet, I think maybe it wouldn't have been the first thing all of them thought of, but many of them had their own sustainability goals. And so what they were faced with is a world where they had these goals, but they weren't sure how they were going to meet them. Or if you're a medium to small supplier, you know, doing the engineering work or doing the inventory to really understand what your emissions are might not be something you have a lot of experience in, and you might not have money to do it. So one of the things we found is that a little bit of assistance goes a long way, even more than co-investment. And sometimes we invest alongside them, but more than that is the knowledge, the expertise. We had done it for ourselves, and so we had credibility to say, okay, here's how you can do it. And it can be harder to do it in manufacturing than, say, you know, non-manufacturing. So it's a partnership. And we still, you know, you asked about what the challenges are. Even when you get onto clean energy, if you increase, you know, manufacturing or you increase supply of X or Y, you have to make sure that you have to go back and pick all that up. You can't,
it's got to match.
Once you get there, it's not, you're still moving, you know, because the supply chain is dynamic.
There's no end point. It's constant evolution.
It just becomes part of the way you have to do business. You know?
I think it's great. Even so interesting about knowing your carbon. Like I wouldn't even know where to calculate how much carbon I would produce to then attempt to offset it. Like
yeah, there's lots.
I wouldn't know where to pull that
places
mathematical
to
equation.
Do your own personal carbon footprint. But I think one of the opportunities here is that luckily you're not an Apple supplier, so you don't have to go do a big
maybe one day.
But yeah, maybe one day. But you know, for your personal, you know, what we're trying to do is make it easy for at least one part of your life to be lower carbon, and that's like when you're using your device. And we all spend a lot of time on our devices these days. So.
100%. And it's created such an opportunity with me for my work with social media. I
super cool.
Use my iPhone for nearly everything. it's amazing. So
yeah, I know.
Even for the podcast. This one's actually shot on iPhone.
Hey, nice. I like the orange.
I know. I feel very supported. Orange is my favorite color. It's just nice ring of orange. Now, Apple's done such an incredible job so far, but what's the next decade look like at Apple? What's the next 10 years?
Yeah, you know, we have this 2030 goal. That's obviously animating us, but we've never sort of worked in short-term increments. The innovations at Apple, you know, the roadmaps go out years and years. And the same has to happen here. You know, science tells us that reducing emissions as much as you can by 2030 helps. It buys us additional time to continue to do what needs to be done. So, you know, most people say by 2050 you have to have zero emissions. So that's a big delta. You know, we'll probably reduce our emissions upwards of 75% by 2030. But then that still leaves emissions, 25%, that have to be covered right now by offsets, but over time just have to go away.
Yeah.
So there's going to constantly be work. And then when you combine that with the fact that there'll be innovations along the way, it'll get easier.
New technologies.
Hopefully it gets easier.
Certainly. And what advice would you have to other big companies or even people with so much experience in sustainability and reducing emissions? What would you recommend to other companies or even individuals like myself who don't know my carbon footprint?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think learning and making choices and being part of, for individuals and for our users, I always say the first thing is recycling and trade-in. Those programs are there first to make purchase easy, but if you think of your device as having a value from a material standpoint, that's beyond all the wonderful things it does when it's plugged in and working. At the end of life, you know, just that simple act of being part of the recycling process, what we call the circular economy, is a huge help. And if you think about that in your own life, like how to maximize the materials you do use and not waste, you know, whether that's food waste is a huge source, and developed countries of emissions, because you put so much into getting the food, and then you don't use it, and it still contributes to carbon in the atmosphere. So that's a huge opportunity. And I love, you're taking care of a huge one. Transportation, how you get around is a huge personal decision. And for a lot of people, they might say, well, I'm not changing my car, but even using mass transit when you can makes a huge difference. So living in the city, I live in a city, I can walk most of the places that I need to go on the weekends when I'm not at work. That's a huge opportunity. So there's plenty of things we can all do. We're proud that, one of the things you can do is make a choice and know that with Apple, your emissions are being taken care of for that part of your day.
Certainly. It's a big part of your day too, with your phone. It certainly is. And having so much success working with the president of the US to leading Apple on sustainability, what does success mean to you personally?
I think I've been very, blessed in my life that I've had opportunities to work on things. First, I work on my passion, which is the environment, and I have the opportunity to be impactful around it, to meet the moment the best way I know how in the places I've been. So I think impact and scale, again, you can have the scale that Apple has, and that comes with responsibility and opportunities to lead. But you can also have a very small scale personally, or in a smaller company or a startup or whatever. But you can put in your mind the idea of, I can impact this positively. And the decisions you make every day can either impact it positively or potentially negatively. And just carrying that in your heart and your mind, I think, makes a difference.
I've been so inspired by your chat today, Lisa. I find it so amazing how you go about things, not just practically, but effectively in the environment that makes sense for people, and it makes sense for the business too, which allows you to do it for forever. So thank you so much for your time today and coming on. And I'm so inspired. I didn't realize the detail that you guys go into, down to the ink in the plastics and the casings.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that's the way we are at Apple. But it's been such a joy, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.